The chiffon skirt's hem caught on my ankle as I spun, sending me careening sideways, arms flailing. The planked floor of the conservatory pressed itself cruelly into my hip. Sheet music fluttered to the ground, an avalanche of cold notes. Fingers buried in the grooved wood, I forced myself up, cheeks burning. The room echoed with a single cough, someone stifling a laugh. 8 pairs of eyes peered at me over the scratched mahogany jury table, some vaguely sympathetic, some cool, too barely hiding their smirks. I saw the Madrid sunlight glint on the chair legs. My heartbeat crowded my ears. "Señorita Gonzalez," said the head examiner, voice as clipped as the hem of his tweed trousers, "do you require medical attention, or can you begin again?" I could hear my mother's voice, all misplaced hope and fluttery worry, trembling in some far-off memory. "Es jurado es gent seria, Lucia, don't make a fool of yourself. Only I was already the fool and this was real, not rehearsal." My hand trembled as I pushed myself up, my chest twisting with rage I couldn't show. I didn't look at the other examinees. I stared at the jury, cheeks hot, and said with as much dignity as I could, "No est hereda." My voice barely sounded like mine. I can begin again." Someone on the end, a grey-haired woman with thick eyeliner, leaned toward her neighbor and murmured just loud enough, "Esto es lo que pasa cuando se deja soñar a las niñas de barrio." My back stiffened. Maybe I was supposed to cry, but rage welled up instead. I wanted to stalk out, leave these brittle, elegant experts to their shuffling papers and hunched conversation, but I forced my feet into fifth position. I heard my father's voice now, always practical, never cruel. "Lucia, no to-dos puden ser artistas, como vas a pagarlas bailando." As the pianist began again, my movements felt leaden, fingers tingling from impact and fury. The music skittered through the room, but I barely heard it. I forced my limbs through the steps, acutely aware of every sneer, every note they scratched onto their clipboards. Rage burned hotter with each turn, until finally it sputtered out, useless at the last pirouette which I landed too soon, stumbling for the second time. When the music faded, a hush swelled, a vacuum of disappointment I couldn't fill. "Gracias, Señorita Gonzalez," said the examiner. Their faces returned to blandness, the scene over. My feet dragged as I exited the hall. No one looked up. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked, eyes stinging, down the marble steps past photographs of former prodigies whose lives seemed impossibly far from mine. Out on the broad avenue, the Madrid sun was merciless. My phone buzzed. A message from my cousin Marisa. "Que tal, prima, ti rompieron mucho." I didn't answer. I didn't know how to explain the ache that had nothing to do with the bruised hip. That summer, the news spread through the neighborhood fast. Rejection from the conservatory, Lucia's big dream dead in a single slip. When I came back to Papa's apartment, the kitchen air felt thick with unspoken judgment. My father barely looked up from his meat-stuffed pimientos. "Mama says you can take the pharmacy course," he muttered. "At least you'll have a seguro." Safe. There was no safety here, only smothering kindness in a crowded 2-bedroom, pity in the eyes of my aunts, but I couldn't let it go. Night after night, I returned to the practice room I'd built in the spare bedroom, an uneven patch of linoleum and a cracked mirror. Every step had to be quiet after midnight. My parents' room was tiny, and the neighbor's baby screamed when I leapt. But fury glittered under my skin. I danced with headphones blasting, movements burning through muscle memory and shame. I was uninvited to every family celebration for 6 months. My cousin's comments filtered through WhatsApp messages. "She thinks she's better than us. Bailarina por favor que tonteria." Still I kept moving. The city grew colder as autumn advanced, and I found work cleaning studios before dawn for extra money. Through the half-open door, I'd watch the real dancers glide through their classes, elegant, tall, all sharp elbows and dismissive glances when they caught my reflection. Sometimes one of their parents would intercept me. "Oi degelo de sonia, hey vida fura della spijo." I bit my tongue bloody, mopping floors they couldn't bear to dirty themselves. Then, a year later, I found a flyer tacked to a street lamp. "Open auditions for contemporary troupe, no experience necessary." I took the metro to Lavapiés, heart hammering, sweat leaking through my one cheap leotard. Dozens crammed into the graffitied hall, most far younger, their faces hard with hunger. I was invisible in the back row, but when my chance came, I danced like there was fire under my nails, like all of Madrid would collapse if I stopped. When the director called my number a week later, I nearly dropped my phone into the pot of beans I was stirring. The troupe was different, raw, loud, clumsy sometimes, but gleefully strange. No tradition weighed us down. Our first show was in a smoky bar basement, an audience of 7, half of whom were friends, one a very drunk bartender. Still, I danced as if it was the biggest theatre in the world, and for the first time, applause didn't sound like pity. We travelled. Sometimes our fee was a meal and a train ticket. But the bruises meant something new, wounds earned, not proof of failure. For 2 years, I did everything: teaching children's classes in dusty community centres, choreographing wedding dances for shy couples, taking odd jobs to afford the metro rides across the city. If our troupe was paid, I sent most of it home for the bills. If my name was misspelled in the programme, at least it was there. After the 3rd year, a dancer dropped out before an international festival. Injury. I learned her solo in 3 days. When I performed in front of hundreds in Lyon, I heard cheers that weren't just polite. Afterward, a quiet man with a French accent introduced himself with the kind of politesse that made even my nerves settle. He ran a contemporary company in Marseille. He liked the way I moved. Marseille felt like another universe. There were moments I almost gave up, the language, the loneliness, the impossibly high expectations, but I could feel the edge of the world crack open. The choreography was brutal on my body, all jagged lifts and frantic leaps, but I learned to use my anger to cut through exhaustion. Then one evening I choreographed a short piece for the company's annual showcase. It was raw, full of fight, about rage and restraint, about being unseen. After that night, the director asked if I would assist him on another work. It felt like someone had finally watched me, really watched for the first time. News filtered home so slowly. Sometimes I'd hear secondhand through friends of friends from Madrid, "Did you hear? Lucia is abroad dancing with the French," but the tone was always skeptical. "Seguro que limpia suelos arhai." Sure, she probably cleans floors. I wrote to my parents every other week out of guilt, not expectation. My mother answered, asking if I ate enough. My father never said he was proud, but slowly an online video trickled through WhatsApp. Clips of my solos began circulating. A journalist from Madrid wrote a profile, an exiled hometown girl making good in Europe. My old troupe asked me to choreograph a festival closer. It was a prestigious gig. They needed someone homegrown. The city's oldest theatre, gilded balconies and velvet seats, they paid for my flight. I came back to Madrid after 6 years. I barely recognized the buildings. My parents had moved to a smaller flat farther north. When I arrived at the old place, neighbors peered from behind curtains. At my cousin's bakery, conversation hushed as I walked in. The same men who had called me ridiculous years ago now eyed me with a wary curiosity. My Aunt Rosa tried to hug me but stopped just short, unsure of herself. That evening before the show, I walked the city's streets alone. The night was heavy with the dusty perfume of jacaranda in bloom, the pavement damp with recent rain. I passed the old conservatory by instinct. The doors were locked, but I stood under the marble arch, remembering my hands pressed hard to the wood grain, the way my body trembled with rage. I breathed in, let the feeling settle inside me, but it no longer festered. It just was. The day of the festival, the theatre buzzed with familiar faces, old classmates in shiny shoes, teachers from my failed audition, a few younger dancers who eyed me with a new, careful kind of respect. My family filled 2 rows, my mother weeping in anticipation before the curtain even rose. Marissa arrived late and took a selfie with my program in hand. Backstage, I pressed my palm against the cold brick wall, steadying my breath. My name echoed through the PA system in an accent still thick with Madrid. For a moment, I caught sight of my reflection, not the trembling dropout from years before, but leaner, steadier, quietly changed. When the first chord struck, we stepped into the light. 4 dancers moved behind me, each echoing my steps. I'd built the piece from fragments of my earliest memories, childhood games in the barrio, the sound of my father's disappointed sighs, the hush of humiliation in crowded rooms. I danced not for the jury or the teachers or my parents, but for the small, furious part of myself that had never given up. The music built, sharp and rising. I felt the old anger thread through my limbs, then slip away, replaced by something new. Joy, vindication, no, just the quiet certainty of arriving. As the piece ended, we locked eyes, dancers and audience, the kind of hush that says for just a second, "We see you." The applause thundered. I found my family amid the crowd afterward. My father jostled through, face flushed, hands rough and tight on my shoulders. "Myra quello has logrado, hija," he murmured. I saw the disbelief struggling with pride in his eyes. No pensée, his voice trailed off. I shook my head, too full to speak. My mother's tears soaked my shirt. Marissa grinned, phone raised for another picture. But the final, sharpest closure came outside the theatre, under the striped awning when two former teachers, jury members from that disastrous day, approached. The woman with the grey hair regarded me closely, her painted eyes sharper than ever. Lucia Gonzalez, you have changed, she conceded, her tone thin but lacquered by forced admiration. I let myself feel the old wound the way her words once flayed me. But I saw now how small her world was, how large mine had become. Gracias, professora, I said, voice smooth. Sometimes you need to leave home to know how to return. She smiled, brittle as sugar. But as she reached out to take my hand, I felt her tremble just a little. That night the whole neighborhood celebrated. In the bar I used to scrub floors for, my first director hugged me, beer sloshing from his glass. My father raised a toast. Por las locuras que no entendimos hasta que nos salvan, for the madness we never understand until it saves us. I danced for them, barefoot on sticky tiles, laughter echoing through the smoke. In their applause there was no mockery now, only awe and something else. Apology maybe, or just the shock of a dream come true. When dawn washed over Madrid, painting the rooftops pale gold, I stood at my old bedroom window, shoulders loose, heartbeat steady. I had come home and nothing was as small or as cruel as I remembered. Outside, the world waited, wide and open, ready for the next impossible step.